Hi, I'm Jessica, and welcome to our crash course on fractions. More specifically, we're going to be looking at operations on fractions. So addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division of fractions. Sometimes people think fractions are a little harder. They get a little nervous when they hear the word fraction because they worry about it being harder than a regular number. But really, once you've put a few rules into place, fractions are actually no more difficult than adding or subtracting any other number. So let's take a look at that. To help us out today, we're going to be looking at the concepts of common denominators, lowest common multiple, greatest common factor, equivalent fractions, mixed numbers, improper fractions, and finally, the order of operations, or BEDMAS. So the first operation we're going to look at is multiplying fractions. And to do that, we're going to take a look at 4 over 5 being multiplied by 7 over 12. Honestly, multiplying fractions is probably the easiest of the operations because all we have to do is multiply the numerator by the numerator and the denominator by the denominator, just like this. So you see I've got 4 multiplied by 7, and that's over 5 multiplied by 12. That will leave us with 28 over 60. So 28 over 60, you notice, we can probably reduce that, okay? So we want to get this down to its lowest form. So I'm just going to take 28 and 60 and reduce it in the same way I would to find an equivalent fraction. In other words, I've got to find something that I can divide evenly into 28 and 60. So because I've got an even number on the top and the bottom, I can divide first by 2 in both cases. So I'm going to divide 28 by 2, and I'm going to divide my 60 by 2. And that gets me to 14 over 30. Again, we have these nice even-steven numbers here. So I'm going to divide them again by 2 and see if I can get a simpler form. All right, there we go. We can get it as far as 7 over 15. Now, you'll notice that there's nothing that I can divide evenly into 7 and 15. So I can't really go any further with this. Before we go on to any other operation, though, I do want to tell you another alternative method, okay? So it's a little different because this time when I do my multiplication, I still do the numerator by the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. So 4 times 7 over 5 times 12 to give me 28 over 60. But this time, I'm going to look to reduce my steps so I don't have quite as many. So I'm going to try and look for the biggest possible number that I can fit evenly into 28 and 60. So this is where greatest common factor can come in. So if I'm looking at 28 and 60, the biggest number I can get into both of these evenly is 4. So instead of doing multiple divisions by 2, I'm going to actually just take both my numerator and denominator, and I'm going to divide them by 4. That'll get me to 7 over 15 more directly. So there are 2 different options. Both of them work, just this one's just a little bit shorter. And if you are really up on your multiplication tables, then it'll save a few steps for you. So the second operation we're going to look at is dividing fractions. But before we get started, I have a question for you. What is the first step in dividing fractions? Change the division sign to a multiplication sign, and A, invert the first fraction, B, invert the second fraction, C, invert both fractions, or D, write the fractions on the same denominator. If you got B, your answer is correct. We're going to have to invert the second fraction. So let's take a look at what happens here, okay? You see that in our problem, we have 3 over 8 divided by 7 over 9. So our steps clearly indicated that we're going to have to switch this division sign to a multiplication. But then don't forget that we're going to need to invert or flip that second fraction. So this is what it looks like. We have multiplied. Okay, so we've got the division sign changed to a multiplication, and here we have the reciprocal. So we had 7 over 9, and now we have the reciprocal 9 over 7. So our fraction has been flipped or inverted. Now we're ready to multiply the numerator by the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. So you see that's what's going on here. 3 times 9 over 8 times 7 is going to give us 27 over 56. Now, normally we would be looking to reduce this, which is what we're going to do, but you probably have already noticed that we can't get any numbers evenly into both 27 and 56. And because of that, we actually just have to stop right here. We can't simplify this any further, so our answer stays at 27 over 56. So the third operation we're going to look at is subtracting fractions. But before we do, I have a question for you. True or false? To subtract fractions, you simply subtract the numerators and subtract the denominators. So the answer is false. What we actually want to do is make a common denominator. So if we take a look at our example here of 11 over 18, we're going to subtract 3 over 9 from that. And in order to do that, we've got to make the denominator common. And so one of the quickest ways, the fastest ways to do this is actually just to take the two denominators and multiply them. In other words, multiply them in a specific way though. So I'm going to take 18 and I'm going to multiply that by 9. And to make this work, I also have to make sure that I multiply my numerator by 9. So then I'm going to look at the 9 and I'm going to take that and multiply it, that denominator, by 18. And I just have to remember to take the numerator and also multiply it by 18. So you can see that I've multiplied the denominators together to get a common denominator of 162. So now my problem is reading 99 over 162 minus 54 over 162. Now here I want to not be subtracting those denominators because 162 minus 162 would give me 0, and that is actually completely incorrect. So I'm going to focus on the numerators. We're going to subtract 99 minus 54, and that will give us, 99 minus 54 over 162, and that's going to give us 45 over 162. I'm going to stop here for a second and I'm going to go over to the other side of my board and I'm going to show you the same problem, but this time right from the start again, but with a slightly different strategy. I want to look for a lowest common multiple here. So again, I'm still looking to make a common denominator, but I want to know the lowest common multiple between 9 and 18. In this case, it's of course 18. So the advantage of this is that I don't have to change the 11 over 18. All I have to do is change the fraction 3 over 9. And I do that by making the 9 18 by multiplying it by 2. So I'm going to go 9 times 2, and then I'm also going to take the 3 and multiply it by 2 because I have to do the same thing in the denominator and the numerator. Okay, I have to do them for both. Okay, so that gives me 11 over 18 minus 6 over 18. And once again, I do not want to just say 18 minus 18, the denominator minus the denominator, because that would give me 0 and I would be wrong. So I'm going to focus on the numerators. 11 minus 6 over 18 is where I'm at right now with my problem. And when I actually do that subtraction, it gives me 5 over 18. So some of you are probably thinking, that doesn't look like the same fraction to me. But remember, you should always be reducing your fractions. So if I go over here, I can actually get numbers evenly into 45 and 162. So if I think about the greatest common factor between 45 and 162, that's going to be 9. So I'm going to just divide 45 by 9, and I'm going to divide the 162 by 9. And that is going to give me the 5 over 18, which is what I'm expecting from the other side. So you see, both of these are valid options. They both give you the same answer. But if you are familiar with your lowest common multiples and they're easy to pick off, then this one is slightly faster. If not, no worries. This way is going to work every time. It's just going to require you to reduce a few more times. In the second option I gave you, you kind of get to your answer right away, or with less steps. So for our fourth and final operation, we're going to be looking at adding fractions. And this is a lot like subtracting fractions because we have to look for a common denominator. So we're going to start with our example here of 2 over 5 plus 3 over 4. The lowest common multiple between 5 and 4 is 20. So what we're going to do is actually just make both of those 20 by simply taking our 5 and multiplying it by 4. And of course, we have to do the same thing to our numerator. So 2 times 4. And then over here, we're going to take our 4 and multiply it by 5. And we have to do the same thing on top with the numerator. So we've got 3 times 5. So this gives us 8 over 20 plus 15 over 20. Now remember, we don't want to add the denominators. That would be 20 plus 20, which would give us 40, and we don't want to do that. That would be wrong. So what we are going to do is add the numerators. We have 8 plus 15 over 20, and that will give us 23 over 20. Now, 23 over 20, a quick check, that's going to tell us that there's nothing that we can evenly get into both 23 and 20. So we're going to stop there. This is what we call an improper fraction. And in this video, we're not going to go into how to deal with that. You're going to have to watch our second video to know what to do with improper fractions. So that's it for our crash course on basic operations involving fractions. On the next crash course, we're going to be looking at how to deal with mixed fractions or improper fractions. We're also going to be looking at chains of operations involving fractions. So I really hope you check that one out, and we'll see you next time.